part of the Earglue Media family of podcasts.
You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 328, the Star Wars Saga, Skywalker Saga, Revenge of the Sith. We are wrapping up the final movie in the prequel trilogy, and we're doing a retrospective look. We'll take a look at both the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy right after we get through with this, as part of a 9-episode series of episodes, if that makes sense. All right. Joining me tonight is the man he's been waiting for this whole time, right? Because this is really kind of one of his movies here, Revenge of the Sith. How an appropriate title to welcome in the producer and Emperor Extraordinaire, whatever you want to call you, Mike Rondo. Mike, welcome to the show again.
Oh, it's great to be back for the 100th time. Or actually 200 and something. I don't know what it is actually at this point. I mean, I've left, but I'm not really gone. Sorry for the miscues introing things. Like I forgot to hit the thing, and we'll work these bugs out at some point. I mean, this is just tradition now. Before we go live, doing these streams, you know, Albert almost unplugged a few things. We almost had problems before that. You got the Sith eyes going because of your
if I
screen
do
in the
this,
back.
like I don't know if you can see that. Look at that.
I feel bad for the people that are listening to audio. Albert's got a screen behind him.
I've got a green screen, but sometimes when the reflection, it like does weird things to my glasses. So this is giving me like kind of like a Anakin. Well, it needs to be yellow, but there we go. How about that? Can you see that?
There you go. That works.
Yeah.
That works. It's funny, you know, you
It's
get
all
the
in character.
background there that I was going to use for the background for the stream.
Oh,
actually.
really?
But I ended up going with you know, the generic thing, the thumbnail that you hate that I used for the temporary thumbnail.
Right?
Yeah. I know Greg. I think his name was Greg. He got in touch with me a few weeks ago. I will get back to him, Greg, if you're listening. But you know, we'll get to that at some point. Just been busy, so don't think I forgot about you. I didn't. So anyway.
All right.
Sorry. Let's get into this, Albert.
Well, let's do this. We're going to we'll get into some news here, and we're going to start with something that kind of broke here very recently. This is the Star Wars Squadron. So this was long rumored. We knew EA had something in the works. There were a lot of people that, you know, for better or for worse, wanted EA to have something in the works.
Probably worse.
Probably for worse. I don't know. I'm indifferent, I guess. I don't really care. Every studio, and we talked about this on the EGM roundtable. Like every studio has their moments. Every studio doesn't have their moments, right? They're always going to put one that's kind of in the pooper, and they're going to have some good ones. And so, anyways, EA is no different.
I don't think you could screw this one up though.
So this is Star Wars Squadrons. It sounds like, so this was leaked a couple days ago on Xbox. It was out there. They took it down. Then finally they were kind of forced to confess, okay, yeah, fine, you caught us.
Yeah.
And the official announcement's coming out this Monday, which is the 15th, I think, maybe 16th.
Yes.
But this looks to be a Star Wars space simulator type game, for lack of a better term or definition.
Well, I don't know too much about it. I was assuming this was like a multiplayer. You get a squad, I get a squad. We go fight each other or whatever, or something like that. But I guess I could be wrong. I don't know. It looks. I mean, that promo shot looks pretty cool. I'll give you that.
The artwork looks great. I mean, it does look like it is a, a Squadrons tells me that it's space combat. That's what I'm picking up on this, right?
Which isn't bad. I just was horrible at it in Battlefront 1 and 2 there.
And I don't want that. I don't want it to be Battlefront 2 fighting, and I don't think it is. I mean, I don't think they would just repurpose that. Yeah, no, I don't think they would do that. But maybe, maybe it is. Maybe they do this like an enhanced version of like a TIE Fighter series or something, right? Something more modernized with, better graphics and all of that. That would certainly look cool. I've never been one, as much as I love the Star Wars ships and combat and all that, I've never been a big fan of playing space battles. I don't know what it is.
Well,
I'm not bad at it. I just don't. It doesn't. I don't know.
I'm
What about you?
horrible at it. I mean, it sounds good, I think, on paper. Like, hey, you're gonna. This is what we. You know, if you were in the Star Wars galaxy and you had your own ship, you'd want to do all this stuff. But I just don't know if it works as a game. Well, maybe it does for some. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm just horrible at space combat, so I guess I don't really gravitate towards it. if I could play the Slave 1, I'd be happy. Maybe I'll take the dive, but I was still horrible doing that on Battlefront 1 and 2, so I don't know if it's going to help me at all, but I'm intrigued. I mean, it's nice to see they got a game coming out, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so
Yeah.
you know.
What about this, the artwork here? I mean, there's really nothing in here that would leak anything. I mean, I got questions about who she is.
She looks like Rey, but I don't think it's Rey.
No, because I mean, she's up against. I mean, well, we don't know for sure, but everything looks like it's set in the original trilogy era ish, right?
Yes.
I mean, you got Imperial Star Destroyer back there. You got Tie Fighters. That's clearly an Imperial Tie Fighter pilot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All the ships in the Rebel
You got
Alliance here.
the TIE fighter that was in Rogue One here. What was that
Oh
one?
yeah, the little Dorito
Yeah,
fighter.
no, the Rogue one, the Defender, whatever the hell it was. I
Yeah.
forget the name of it, but that looks there. This looks like a black TIE fighter though, not a gray typical. I don't know. Interesting. Then you get the Dorito one here, and then the bomber and stuff. I don't know. It's pretty
Very
cool.
good.
You get the Y wing. It looks like maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll get all the classics, I'm sure, right? And,
Oh, I'm
hopefully
sure.
we'll get like the stellar. We know nothing about this game, folks. If you can't
Absolutely
tell.
nothing
We're
till
completely
Monday.
speculating. We'll know more on Monday here, and probably we talked about maybe even doing, depending on how big the news is, Mike and I may come back and do a show or something, just a quick 15-minute breakdown of our thoughts and opinions on what we saw.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's a lot and not the recent Sega announcement.
It probably is. No, I mean, I'll say this, even with Star Wars, as I've been disgruntled a little bit with some of the new stuff. The artwork is always on point, man. Even if you don't like The Last Jedi, that art book is awesome. Their artwork is always good. I mean, it makes your imaginations do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And this looks pretty cool. I mean, I like the color scheme, orange, black. Those are kind of my favorite colors. But yeah, we'll find out Monday, right? We'll see what the heck this goes, and hopefully it's good. So
cool. The other big thing was we got official confirmation. This is the worst kept secret in the world.
Yeah.
I think everybody, and you can, those of you that are tuned in and watching live, we've pulled it up here. But this is the a certain point of view, the Empire Strikes Back version of it, right? So this comes out November 10th, and this is another book very similar to the very first one we had, which had a bunch of stories that took place. I think it's 40 stories celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Empire Strikes Back. And it's 40 stories that take place in the era of The Empire Strikes Back. So maybe just before, immediately before, in the middle, or just immediately after the movie, which I enjoy. Now, I know you didn't like the first one. I really enjoyed the first one a lot. It was just so different, and there were so many different writers and so many different writing styles. And
I didn't like them meddling with certain characters.
Did they really, though?
Well, yeah, I think so.
I mean,
and then, the big one, the one that ruins it all for me, was the R5, because I had a theory that the Force is the one that did that with R5 and all that, and that went out the window.
Yeah.
Because of R5 and dreaming and all that other crap that happened there. I don't know. That ruined that for me. I don't know. It was okay. There were moments it was pretty decent. Like, I think the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan discussion was pretty cool.
Right.
That's something we've always wanted. I want to see that in the Obi-Wan what do you call it? Disney Plus. Yes, thank you. I'll get it out of my mouth at some point. Now, what intrigues me here is maybe Yoda's perspective with Luke in training. Maybe we get something before Luke arrives, when Luke leaves. Maybe we have a scene with, Obi-Wan's watching, Yoda and him are watching him take off, and maybe they have another discussion.
Right.
I don't know. It could be interesting moments with that. So I'm intrigued. I'll take I'll listen to the audiobook, see how it goes. I don't know. I mean, the books for me, they're mostly missed these days, but you gotta take it from a grain of salt here, because I used to hate the old EU too. So, I'm never happy, I guess.
Right. You haven't been happy since '83. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Thrawn thing is overhyped anyway. So,
All right.
I mean, I'm going to get all the hate now. So
Down, boy,
that's
down.
fine.
Yeah, you're going to get a ton of hate here.
Yeah,
so, just as a Vine opinion, I actually enjoy the books, and
I know you do.
I enjoyed the last one. Here's the thing, though, about these. What I'm looking forward to is, like, the chances are with 40 stories that we are going to get something that, just like you said, the R5 story, or
You're gonna get the Wampa story.
You're going to get something that is going to probably change your viewpoint on something, right? And that's kind of what I like. I actually enjoy that. It challenges me. It goes against the grain of my headcanon. I think that's all great. I think it helps to build Star Wars character. No, I'm kidding. But I do enjoy that. The thing about these stories is it's always that certain point of view tagline of Star Wars that I don't like. I know. You and I agree here. Like it's just a safe way to do something and say, well, we didn't really say that, or it depends on how you look at it. And I just want things to be I want things to be black and white sometimes, and I get it. They're not. I'm not here to say that that's wrong or right, but it's just it's a safe way to do these kinds of things and play around with things. And for me, I'm just kind of like,
they go to know. They use that excuse a little too much. I think that's the problem. It's like killing off a character and bringing him back. They kind of go into the well a little too many times there. But, you'll get something with the Wampa with his arm cut off, and, he'll tell his sad story of why he lost his arm or something.
Yeah.
Something goofy like that, I'm sure will happen.
I want the Wilbur Hood story.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's going to happen.
Somebody's got to be writing that.
You got it. And the Ugonauts, the Ugonauts there, the Ugonauts. I don't know why I keep saying that. With that whole thing, maybe the Stormtrooper. Maybe we'll get the droid that swears.
Ichuta. Yeah, let's hear what's going on there. Like that.
Yeah, let's find out.
That'd be great if there was a story of him and just how awful his day was, and he's just at the point where he didn't want to hear anything from anybody.
Exactly.
And then C-3PO comes in that scene.
It's like
the fires that off.
It's you want to deal with. It's like, and he just drops the swear right there.
Yeah.
You and I agree it's a swear. I don't know if anyone else in the audience agrees with us or not, but you and I pretty much said
Ichuta. Yeah, that means F-U or excuse me, that is a kid's show, but
poop or whatever you want to. That's how I took it. Eat poop is the one I go with, and I've used it in the past for when someone swore on the show when we used it as a censor. I've used that.
Oh, nice. That's a good one.
That's way back though in the days, way back.
Those are the lost episodes.
Yeah, that no one will ever hear again. But I'm looking forward to. I mean, the one thing about the Star Wars books, I always give them a try anyway. And sometimes I'm surprised. I think this, because it's Empire, I think I'm going to enjoy it more than the previous one. And there'll be some interesting perspectives, like Yoda, Obi-Wan maybe, and even Darth Vader. Maybe we'll have a moment with him, although we probably won't. I don't know. We'll find out. So.
Yeah. Now, so this is, again, November 10th. You guys can pre-order that already. They've already put the pre-orders up for that. And still no word on the authors just yet, like even on their official website. But
John Jackson Miller, because he announced it. He announced it, so he's one, which is good because I like him. He does great character development, so I'm happy with that. So I don't know who else is in there. I didn't see anyone else announced or whatever.
No, and I haven't honestly either. But so anyways, there's still a lot of time between now and November 10th, and we'll definitely come back and certainly talk about it here on the show when we get there. So
yes.
All right, well, let's get into the main show because there's a lot to talk about here. We're going to talk about Revenge of the Sith, and just to kind of recap how we're doing these shows, we are going to talk about things both on screen and off screen that we really liked or maybe stood out for us in some way. And then the very end of the show, we will both have our own pick of a scene or some quotes, but maybe sometimes both or a couple of both to kind of talk about, break down a little bit more, just things that we've never really even had a chance to talk about on the show, or at least not anytime recently. So let's talk about the tail of the tape. This is what we've been doing here to kind of start off. And again, so from a budget perspective, this really was, again, right in that same way. I mean, the first two were $115 million. This one came in at $113 million. You would think like these would go up, right? You would think that as the movies went on and the technology improved, that the budgets would get higher. Maybe they didn't. I guess maybe it was kind of a net sum loss or gain or whatever, where it was just kind of the same because of they found better ways to do the technology or animation was. They could do more with less.
George
kind of thing.
He's always trying to get cheaper. Try to get the razzle dazzle, but try to reduce the price too, because he's thinking from a film perspective, where if he gets that price down, more people will want to use it and buy from him or whatever. You know what I mean? Like he's always thinking that type of thing.
Right, it's his money.
Yeah, well, yes, of course it is, but he wants to sell that later on. Like when he came up with Pixar there, that whole technology and that. He sold that off and stuff. So he's thinking business-wise, too. But he also wants to keep it under budget, too, because he doesn't want to blow everything. This is what makes him millions of dollars. He's not going to spend it all on one thing.
Right.
You got to plan this out and do it, he's actually a pretty good businessman. We don't hear much about that, but I'm curious more about that someday. But anyway,
Yeah. So and then for that, I mean, 113 million. It then ended up turning around and earning what was it? 800, 900
68.
million dollars.
Yes, you round it up. Yeah,
868 million. Yeah, box
yeah.
office total in. So pretty good draw. I mean, again, these are numbers from 2004,
Mhm.
2005. Sorry.
Yes, yes.
So it's perspective wise, it was pretty big. Don't get me wrong, it was huge. And in fact, they broke a record. I think it was 50 million at the time, at least for a Thursday, and that still may hold. I don't know for sure if that still holds or not, but 50 million just alone in on the Thursday that it released. So yeah, by all accounts, it was a successful film financially. By all accounts, I would say it was a successful film from a critics and fan perspective as well. I mean, it had its doubters. It had the people in there that were
Oh yeah.
had there are always some knucklehead out there, right? Both as a critic and fan that want to tear things down. But by and large, I think he really did not step into a lot of the things that he stepped into with like the first and second movie that brought upon a lot of the criticism that he got for those first two. But and again, I've told you I've camped out for the first one. Second, I did not camp out for Revenge of the Sith. Believe it or
I
not.
didn't either. I actually remember seeing. I went to a late show. I think I went to the 10 p.m. show. Actually, I went way after, with one of my friends, and we watched it, and it was fine. It was no big
Yeah.
deal. It was weird.
It
I don't
was
know.
weird for me too because the first two were such events, right? They were so the planning that went around and just the chaos of it all leading up to it, and even while we were there and everything. And then when this one came around, and I was really struggling. I was trying to think of like what was it that was a driving factor for me not going and camping out for this movie like I'd done for the first two. And I can't remember honestly. I don't recall what was going on in 2005 that kept me from doing it. But I will say that I did see the movie on opening night,
Hmm.
and I didn't have the best seats in the theater, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But then, I went back and saw it 8,
yeah.
10
Same.
times, whatever it
Yeah,
was, right? And so I got my viewings in. I had better seats later down the road, but for whatever reason, this wasn't. And it was probably. And I will say this, and I want to ask you the same question. I mean,
yeah.
for most people, I think if you ask them about Revenge of the Sith, looking at the prequel trilogy, most people will say that this is the stronger of the three, that this is their favorite of the three. I would agree. I think I'm in that camp. Or would you say the same thing here?
Oh yeah, this is my second favorite Star Wars film after Empire. It's probably this.
Hmm.
Um, it's pretty high up there. Which is funny because going into it, I remember thinking, all right, it is what it is. I know he turns. We'll see some epic moments. The lightsaber battle that we've all grown up with hearing about, Obi-Wan and Anakin and stuff, and we'll see how it plays out. It should be good because it's going to be a darker
Right.
film. And I remember being at that time in my age, I wanted a darker film. I was in a dark place myself, and I just remember being, all right, well, we'll see where this goes. And I was optimistic, but it was like, oh, if it's on par with the other ones, it's okay if it's on par with that because I enjoyed them. They weren't obviously they weren't the original trilogy at that time. I wasn't thinking that, but it was fine. I didn't have a problem. And then, of course, the micro series leading up to this, I watched, which added to it and got the hype going. So I was hyped up more than I was the at least Attack of the Clones. The Phantom Menace, of course, in my mind was we were all crazy at that point. It'd been 16 years and everything, but going into this, I was like, we'll see where it goes, and I
Yeah.
was pleasantly surprised. Um, yeah, I thought I'm like this is close to Empire as we'll probably get, and this is a good one. At least you got one solid one out of the three here, and this is the best one out of the prequels.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I felt like it was the stronger of them. There was plenty. It was one of the longest. I think it's the second longest, next to the Last
Hmm.
Jedi, in terms of length. And there was a lot to pack into this movie. And it was one of those movies where you going in, you kind of knew more or less how things were going to keep playing out. I think we were all kind of on bated breath to kind of finally see Mustafar, and see this fight that was
Yes.
basically in hell. These two guys fighting in hell, I think is what is kind of the imagery that they were going for there. Lucas was going for there.
Yes.
There were for this movie, leading up to it, there was the soundtrack had already come out. I think before then, no spoilers in the soundtrack, so that was pretty epic to kind of listen to that going into it. But I think by and large, I think this movie, more than anything, and this is one of the other screen comments that I've got, it really felt like this was the end. Like, I remember going and buying this ticket and just having that moment of like, wow, this is it. I'm never beyond after I see this movie, I won't see another Star Wars movie again. I didn't think the sequel trilogy would ever come out. I didn't think Rogue One would ever come out, or Han, Solo Star Wars story. I
Yeah.
really felt like this was going to be the end. I thought that this would be the last movie Lucas would put out of Star Wars, and that Star Wars would die with him. I didn't think he had, and I didn't know much about Lucas at the time, to be honest. Again, this is just pure
Yeah.
conjecture on my part, as a 30-something-year-old kid or whatever. I didn't. I just didn't think that he would do that. I think I figured he would just take this with him. Bear, the legacy would die with him, and that would be the end of it. And so going into that theater and seeing it for the first time, it was a very, I don't know. I wouldn't say intimate moment, but it was just very personal moment for me. Watching it, thinking that this is it. Not going to see Star Wars anymore.
Well, to be honest, I didn't even think we were going to get the prequel trilogy at all because
Yeah.
for many years it was like, and then I figured my mentality at the time was like, oh, this is a bonus. This is it, but this is the bonus. At least I got to see it in my lifetime, and I get to go to the theaters this time because I saw Return of the Jedi. That was the one, my first one, and I saw that in the theater. I missed the previous two, so I missed the big hoopla. I kind of experienced that with the Phantom Menace, but I don't think that even captured what it was when A New Hope came out, or Star Wars actually.
Yeah.
Back then, I think that magic that was then, I never got to feel. I mean, the Phantom Menace was pretty big, and going on in these last couple of years too. It's been pretty big and special, but compared to that, it just wasn't the same. But I figured, all right, well, at least I got to experience George telling a Star Wars story in my lifetime on the big screen, 3 movies, not just the one, because I only saw Return of the Jedi. At least I got to see 3, like a trilogy, and I figured that was it. But then he did the little micro series too. He did that, and I'm like, all right, so this really is the send off. So this is
Yeah.
like you. I'm prepared. Like, okay, this is the end.
Right.
We'll probably get novels, and that'll be it. I doubt we'd even get TV. But then he announces the Clone Wars, the TV thing, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, George, didn't you just do that? And then it enriched the prequel trilogy and those characters, and we've all come to love them, and we all know the history, right?
Yeah.
So then I get to thinking, like, well, I think he'll do something Star Wars again. I just don't know what scale it would be. I figured it'd be more cartoon stuff. Maybe we'd get another movie, but I don't think he was going to do a trilogy. I always had hoped when Katie wrote the Night Sisters stuff, I was hoping he
The
was going
episodes
to,
of Clone Wars.
yeah, he was going to pass it on to Katie and the kids, and Dave kind of do it that way instead of selling to, what happened. I mean, that's what I
Right.
thought that was the plan. I thought that's what he was going to kind of do. But, then he interviewed, I think with Oprah, he said, he told his kids, I'm rich. You're not. You have to go out and get a
Yeah.
job. Which is kind of how I would be if I was George. But I thought he was going to pass the legacy on because Katie wrote, and I was like, oh, well, and she did a pretty good job. I thought she did a great job with the Night Sisters. So I figured, oh, well, we're passing on what we learned here, and this is how it's going to be. But that didn't happen. So
Right.
I don't know. But like you at the time in 2005, you're like, all right, well, this is the end,
is
but I
it.
get to experience it.
Yep.
Sorry, I went on a long tirade there.
No, that's the whole point of this segment, is to talk about, leading up to it and kind of off screen. There were 2 other things that I want to talk about just briefly, and we're not going to dive into them because we could spend a lot of time on these, but there were 2 books that stood out for me during this time. And again, I guess they're not technically canon books at all now. They're just legend stuff, but I really was the novelization
It was great.
by Matthew Sover is awesome. I mean, it really is great. If you've never had a chance to read Revenge of the Sith, the novel itself, take a look at that if you can find it. I mean, you can pretty much buy it for nothing these days. But he does a really, really great job of taking scenes that seem very benign in the movie and expanding on them and putting a lot of structure behind them, and just really kind of fleshing them out in ways that you wouldn't think of. So, and that's all I'll say about it. It's a great novelization if you've not had a chance to read it. And then the other one was the making of book that came out by, what was his name? R.W. Stiltzer. I forget his name. I'm sorry. But anyways, and it's not like a art of book, right? It's not anything like that. It truly is a, book that really gets into like a day by day, almost a week by week production. They include the dates, and they're giving you background on very, personal conversations that are happening between like Rick McCallum and George Lucas, and then the actors, and what's happening going on behind the set and behind the scenes and that sort of thing. So if you've not had a chance to look at that one is a great book, and there's a lot of things in there that they speak about where just getting in the mindset of George Lucas and getting to hear how some of this stuff was kind of tossed around, and let's do this, how about that? Him going to people and saying, well, here's what I think. What do you guys think? And then, you get the responses back and all that. There's really a lot of great stuff like that if you're into that kind of thing, the pre-production stuff or even the post-production stuff within it. And I guess it's kind of obvious since it's the making of Revenge of the Sith. But I don't think we've had a book like that, honestly, for any of the other Star Wars movies. I mean, there's bits and pieces of there, but in terms of like how much they expose in that particular novel or that particular book, it's quite a bit. So
I don't think I've read it. To be honest, I might have at the time. It's just been so long. I don't think I did. Like I don't remember. It's like I don't remember it. So
yeah,
I remember watching the webinar. So maybe I'm getting it mixed in with that, and just kind of that's a possibility. But I don't remember that. But I do remember the novelization being awesome, and like the description of Obi-Wan when he sees what happens to Anakin. That was great. I like that. That would be nice if we saw that in the series coming up. That would be a nice little nod to the book or whatever.
Right.
But who knows what we'll see, what'll happen. So
yeah, and if we get time, I don't know. We'll see how this goes. The show goes because we haven't even started yet. If we have time later, I do want to talk about one scene out of the novelization that's not in the movie, and it speaks to a lot of that in the first two episodes, or I guess as part of this series, right? When we did Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, I was talking a lot about the arrogance that I felt like Yoda had, and he never really says it in the movies. However, there is a scene in novelization where he's talking to Qui-Gon Jinn, and he does mention, I was arrogant, right? He starts blaming himself for all this. And as we give, here we go. I'm talking about it. I said I wasn't going to. We talk about, I know, right? We talk about Yoda so much, and we don't put him in the highest light. And I don't think that's really fair to his character, but it's fair if you look at it from the perspective of what we know from the movies. If you look at it from what we know from the Clone Wars series, you could certainly make an argument that he's not the most humble person, even though he says, he preaches it. He made a lot of mistakes, but we never get that moment where he's really self-reflecting and going, man, I really screwed things up, and I'm just as much to blame here as the council or the next Jedi to my left or to my right. And you get that moment in the novel that I think really grounds him and makes him a more likable character for me. And I say that as Yoda being my favorite character when he first came out. So don't at me, please. Okay. I do like Yoda, but
totally.
Anyways, that's the kind of stuff that's in the novelization and the stuff that you don't get in the movies. So take a look at that if you can.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to the on-screen.
To be fair, we always say, well, just to interrupt you, when we discuss Yoda on the show, and we've been doing this for eons, we always say we like Yoda, but we're very critical of him all the time. But we do like the character. It's kind of, I feel like he's a punching bag in the Cantina cast, and that's kind of not fair to him because he was in a position and all that. But we'll say anyway. We did a dissection on him. Go check it out. But anyway, continue, sir.
All right. Well, let's talk about the moments. So let's start with we're going to start with the on-screen stuff. And again, there is a lot to talk about on screen that happens in Revenge of the Sith. We're going to start with the Battle of Coruscant, because this is one of the honestly, it's one of the cooler space battles, and we really don't have that many, but the scale of this one.
Probably the best opening.
Probably the best opening, too. I would agree 100%, right? With the drums of war.
Oh, yeah.
I'm using those in quotes, but drums of war that we hear.
Last moment of seeing the heroes really as a partnership.
Yeah.
At that point, that
was right. They've already peaked. They've we get to see them in their prime there, and how they peaked as a pairing. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it starts off very benign in terms of you get to see their fighters, and then they're kind of flying around. The music's starting, and then as soon as they come over the side of that the destroyer there, I mean, then you realize, holy bananas, it's an entire war that's literally going on right underneath them, and you don't get to see a lot of that. There's that one shot with the clone trooper, the what's his name? I forget his name now. I used to know his name. I think, is it Oddball that's ejected?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. But anyways, yeah, I mean, you get to actually see him. I mean, and then visually, the amount of work that went into the production of this, like from a CG perspective, is just crazy. There's so much going on. I've seen this movie a billion times, and every time I watch it, there's something else you can look at that's happening in the background, whether it's, explosion, ships chasing each other, right? You're certainly
That's why
not to focus.
Yeah, that's why they put the kitchen sink. Like, you hear the sound because George was like,
Everything.
put everything in.
Right.
And I think Spielberg said, well, you got everything but the kitchen sink. So, of course,
So
George
let's put
being
that
George,
put that into.
put that in, and then you hear the clanking of it and everything. But you're right. I mean, even like the depth of it. I think this is what impresses me most about that whole scene. Never mind the heroes, the drum. And by the way, I'm just going to say this here, and I'm probably going to get yelled at, people at me.
I'm going to ask you right now, but go on.
From top to bottom, I think it's the best soundtrack of all the movies, personally. That could be just my bias because a lot of the darker themes with Anakin and everything, but that's just my opinion. Thanks, Albert, for selling me out there on YouTube. But in any case, but the depth, like when you see them flying through and you see the battles, like one ship's below another ship, and you get that depth of field.
Yeah.
It was pulled off very well. And you think in 2005, comparing it to now, like the technology wasn't exactly as good as it is now, but I think that the way they pulled that off was just really something awesome. Yep. I thought, like the depth, because you got the sense of how massive it was, how far above they were of Coruscant, and then like there's a Star Destroyer here, and then there's one up here, and then there's stuff going on in here.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
Yep,
it was great.
Yeah, and you take that scene, imagine, right, taking that scene now, coupling it with this idea that I'm coming in for the last time ever to see a Star Wars movie, and that was an experience. I mean, that was a true experience of seeing, my last Star Wars movie, and opening with that opening was pretty incredible.
It was a good way to go out. Like, if that's going to be your last opening, here you go. Everything in the kitchen sink.
All right, so let me talk about one that's controversial. I think for me.
Okay.
This is I've never. No. This
No?
is no. I'm moving on to the next bullet here. You can see the notes. They can't.
Yeah. Okay.
The so I want to get your thoughts on this because we've never talked about this. You and I haven't, at least not to my recollection. But I've never been a fan of the Battle of Kashyyyk, and I don't know that it's because I feel like I got cheated. Like, that battle had moments that were cool, but it was never long enough for me. And I thought I was finally going to get to see, we all know the story of, it was originally going to be Wookiees in Return of the Jedi, and that was too costly and all that. And so, they scaled it back. We got the Ewoks, which I know you're a huge fan of. And here was the moment, right? Last movie of Star Wars, $113 million budget. They have CGI technology, stuff that wasn't at their disposal. 2
minutes of Kashyyyk. That's all you get.
Exactly. And we got 1 minute and 43 seconds of Kashyyyk battle. And for me, I just felt really cheated. Now, and that sounds petty because the movie overall is great. But did you ever feel like that should have been more, or am I just wrong? Am I in the minority here? Do people just love all that happens on Kashyyyk?
Well, I'm a little cheated we didn't get enough of Alderaan. No. To be honest, I felt the Kashyyyk thing was very, I would say,
Kashyyyk?
Yeah, it was kind of cheesy. Like I know he did the whole, Chewie, or not Chewie, but the Wookiee doing the Tarzan thing, and I don't know. It felt a little, for what we've had in our mind for all those years now. But this is where I kind of agree with you. It felt kind of, and then like when you see the Wookiees coming over the thing, they're the same Wookiee, like computer generated over and over. You kind of can see it. I do have a little issue with that, but you know what? At the time, I wish we saw more of a battle. I agree with you on that. But I guess the big moment was Commander Gree and Yoda and the whole lopping the heads off, and then Chewbacca.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this: Is it a bigger deal because Chewie was there, and he maybe shouldn't have been there? Like the way he was used, like he was with Tarful and Yoda there.
Mm-hmm.
Should have been, because like you would think, like he would have mentioned something to like Obi-Wan when Obi-Wan came on the ship or something. You know what I mean? Like it kind of seems.
Yeah, I don't know that. I've got problems with that scene. That is one problem I have with it. The other problem I have with the scene, and I don't want to take credit here because the guys over at one of the other shows I listen to, Star Wars in Character, they talk about this all the time. But it's like, Yoda. If you watch that scene, Yoda's just sitting there. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he flips around, beheads Gree, And then the other two Wookiees are they're like, huh,
Yeah, cool,
whatever. Like, I mean, it just seems like a character. Like they would have like pinned him down, asked him, hey, what happened? What's going on? Why did you just flip out literally and cut somebody's head off? And none of that ever happened. So, anyways, but those are my two problems with the scene. But I get what you're saying. Yeah. There are other moments. This is not the only moment in Star Wars where you're like, R2, you've got all this history in your head and you
just
never said a word. Keep it to yourself kind of thing. But yeah.
Well, he's indifferent. He's like, you know what? I'm not getting involved with your problems here, people. I just know things. Yeah. But I ain't saying anything because it's none of my business.
Yep. I'm here to stick something in there, spin it around, open a
I'll
door.
Save everybody because that's the that's the way of things. But I'm keeping to myself. That's what he's saying. But yeah. Well, even with Chewbacca though, you go back to Chewbacca, like he was in the Wookiee hunt, right? Mm-hmm. In the Clone Wars, right? He's there with Ahsoka. I know he's kind of like our lovable friend, and you want him to pop up because it's Chewie and we all love him. But is it like are we going there too much? I don't know. Sometimes I feel like they force these little things in there a little too much. We all love it, but then we're like, I don't know. Yeah. But Kashyyyk, I agree with you. It was kind of. It felt more cheesy to me than like more of a ripoff. I guess, like you're saying, you wanted a big battle and all that stuff. It just seemed kind of, I don't know, a little compared to what we'd seen with the opening space battle and everything else. That it kind of seems a little out of place, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I may be too harsh on it. I don't have a problem with the battle itself, but they certainly played it up in the trailer, and there was a lot of hype going into it, at least from my circle of friends at the time, that this was going to be, kind of a big battle that, was going to be pivotal and that kind of thing. And it really was more of an element to get Yoda off the planet, right? To get him over to Dagobah. At the end of the day, that's really kind of what it was. It was like, okay, we got to get Yoda somewhere where he can figure out that he's got to leave and not be around, Palpatine at the time. He can't be around Kenobi, right? We've got to isolate him in some way. And that's kind of what happened there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so Noah had mentioned whether or not this was the name of Kashyyyk reference was from Kazook in the Christmas special. I believe that's true. And just for sake of reference and trivia, I mean, they actually went to the Star Wars special when they were designing the Battle of Kashyyyk. They went there and pulled a lot of the elements and studied that heavily, as well as obviously Return of the Jedi for some of the stuff and some of the initial stuff, original artwork that they had done when Wookiees were going to be the main character, I guess, for Endor, which would eventually become Endor. So, all right, let's look at okay. So another big thing that happened in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin's fall in the Order 66, and this is huge. I mean, it feels like we're jumping to like some of the bigger ones, but man, I don't even know what to say here. There's so much. Let's start with Anakin's fall and him turning to the dark side and finally giving himself to Palpatine and. This guy right here, if you can see my shirt.
Well, I blame him.
You blame him?
It's all his fault. Yeah, I blame him. If he wasn't such a jerk face, Anakin might have been like, all right, we're cool. If he just let Anakin go, maybe, although he was right, though. I sense much conflict in you. But Anakin being Anakin just did his thing anyway.
Yeah.
And it cost him his life. But, hey, what are you going to do?
Yeah, we'll need to talk about, at some point, we need to talk about Mace Windu and all of that, because I think there's actually a show there, how things could have been different had he treated Anakin differently, extended him more respect.
I proposed the question long ago, what if he was the Anakin's master?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was the one that was closest to, with the style of fighting, I think, to Anakin, right? In touching on the dark side, so to speak, but controlling it. I think he would have benefited from it, but, it is what it is. And, I proposed that question ages ago, but just let that sink in, I guess. Marinate that. But continue, sir.
Well, no, I mean, more than anything, it was just that whole scene between, Anakin and Mace, and then finally Mace going out the window, and then Anakin, that was kind of it. I mean, he was done. He turned and, very begrudgingly did not want to go to the dark side as much as you can see it in his face. You can see that he's pained by it, right? He's lowered himself. He has no other place to go. He's completely bottomed out at this point, and the only thing that he's got on his mind is trying to save Padme.
Yep.
Right. I mean, he's already bitten off more than he can chew. He's already down the path, at that point, you could see it in his eyes. Like I said, it was just like, I have nothing else to do at this point. I cannot be a
Already crossed the
Jedi.
line.
I've crossed the
So
line. I've gone way too far, so I'm just going all in, right?
yeah,
2 feet in, let's do this. Whatever this looks like, let's just do it. Darth Vader, fine. That's my name.
yeah,
Um,
really. I mean, that he just was like, all right, I go with your teachings, man. Cool, let's do it.
I wonder how long he thought about that name, or if that was kind of like a spur of the moment thing, right?
Spur of the moment, you could like he's tapping into the whole thing, and he gets like that like multi-layered voice thing when he says it though. When you hear, it's like he starts sounding like the father, but the dark side of it, and he comes up with his name. So
right.
I don't know. It's interesting.
The Attack of the Clones, and I don't mean that from the movie, but I mean this is the clones turning, and we've talked about this a lot on this show. But if this is your first time listening, maybe it's new to you. But that is, I've always said this. I've got two viewpoints on the whole turning of the clones. When I watched this movie, I can honestly say I didn't care too much. It didn't bother me. Like I didn't really. I mean, I liked all the characters, right? Ayla Secura, I liked her. I liked Kia Di Mundi and everybody else they showed. But it did not have the impact that it does today. And I attribute that to my love of the Clone Wars, right? The Clone Wars itself, the animated series, really makes that fall of the Order 66 order and the scenes that they show, even though there are only a few of them, it really makes it much more significant. You really feel and bear the weight because you know those characters from the Clone Wars in a different way than you did when you first saw Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's again, it's one of the big things that contribute. One of the best things about the Clone Wars is we got so much more that we didn't know we needed or even wanted from the character developments of all these characters. But that scene is the Kia Di Mundi scene is probably the one that really just tears you apart because he's running out there. I think he yells, "Come on,
Marines!"
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite clone, Commander Bakar. That was
he
my
heads
favorite,
out there.
Yeah.
And they leave him out. I mean, leave him out there to dry, and he turns around. Next thing you know, he's getting shot. Deflects a couple bolts. Can't deflect them all, and he falls.
I think Ayla got it worse though. Like they just kept unloading on her. Like, did she say something to get them mad before they went into the?
I mean, it was without prejudice, right? I mean, they were just going and just doing what they needed. I mean, they tried to do the same thing with Ahsoka.
Yeah,
right? We got to see that.
Yes, we did.
So I mean, it was.
But Plo dying too. That kind of bummed me out. I like Plo. He was one of my favorites.
You and Dave Filoni, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're brothers. We're good friends. We like wolves. Plo Koon. It's all good. Hockey. We both like hockey.
Okay.
So, yeah. Sorry. We're like pen
right.
pals. I mean, it's just
nobody knows what that is anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, but yeah, certainly the Attack of the Clones and them turning is kind of a thing. And I remember, again, I've said this in the show before too, like I didn't really like the clones and I hated the clones. And especially when this movie came out,
Really?
I hated the clones even more. Yeah, because
I love them.
I think Jonesy was on the show with me when we talked about this, and you probably don't listen to the shows because you barely even edit them.
Yeah.
What I said was
Try not to edit.
the clones for me going into the prequel trilogy were just an extension of the stormtroopers, and I'm a good guy,
see that. Yeah.
right? I'm a good guy. I never liked the dark side. I never liked the Imperials at all. I know Vader Girl's gonna hate us now, or hate me anyways. I never did, and I still to this day don't really care for them that much. But when the prequels came out, and I found out we were going to get to see the clones after Attack of the Clones, I did not really like them at all. I saw them as, ooh, those are the bad guys, right? I know those guys are going to churn, and they're eventually going to become the stormtroopers, and I hate them. Again,
Was it because the ending there when they were watching them all load up into the yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, this is the end. These are all the jerk faces that are going to churn on,
It's Mike Rondo, all those millions of Mike Rondos. That's what that is.
Exactly. But it wasn't until the Clone Wars came out, and I got to meet the characters of Rex and Fives and Jesse and Echo and all these, on and on and on.
Yep.
That I really started to like them and started to understand what he was trying to do there. And again, shame on me for not seeing it at first. Maybe I was the only one, but I couldn't stand him. And so it was a double painful moment for me in the theater seeing that happen because I was more in favor of the Jedi. Now watching this, I feel bad for the Jedi, but I probably feel even more bad. That's probably not the right way to say it. I feel worse for the clones, right? Because I know that those, by and large, they were good people that had no choice in the matter and were forced to turn. So I don't know. What were
Yeah.
your thoughts? I guess on Order 66.
Well, I mean, I liked it. I mean, well, I didn't. I not like it,
Of course
like
you
it,
did.
but I mean, I
Sicko.
like. No, I liked the way it was done. And I like actually I like the clones. I liked them in phase 1, but phase 2, their armor was cooler. I thought they were cool. I mean, I wasn't attached to them. Like, we know we had, like, Cody was cool. It was all right. It was all right. And then, but I think after initially seeing it, it was like I was very indifferent to the whole thing going down. Really, I mean, I knew it was going to happen, right? I knew that was going to happen, and I knew the clones were going to turn and all that other stuff. I was like, all right, it was fine. I wasn't attached to any clones. Like, we didn't have it like the
Yeah.
Clone Wars. You kind of got a bond with them, right? Like even Cody now. Cody was the one that stood out to me though, because the way, and I mentioned it on the show a little while ago when we were talking about the Clone Wars, is I want to see something with Cody after this all happens, because he didn't do what Rex did. He turned, but he was angry after when he was telling him, well, double your efforts or whatever. I know he's alive type of thing, because he knows Kenobi. He seemed bothered by it. Like, I want to know the post-traumatic stress that he went through.
Yeah.
He was the only one that really, because he was the only real clone that we kind of had any kind of
Yeah, I mean, he had a
Yeah.
scene in there on Utapau with
Yeah.
Kenobi where they were kind of jarring back and forth, and you kind of felt like,
Yeah.
oh, there's some history there, right?
yeah
Of course, we didn't know that what
Yeah.
we knew from the Clone Wars, but yeah, you get. I'm with you. Yeah, there was definitely he was the one that stood out from that movie.
yeah, because like when you see Bakara turn on Kudumundi there, or whatever you want to call his name, Conehead, you don't have that like connection. Like, there's a disconnect there. So when they were all getting slaughtered, like Ayla, she's cool and it was an interesting character, but you didn't have that development where like I really cared. When you get into the Clone Wars, the animated show, thanks Albert. It's all, yeah, he's picking on me in the chat over here. But yeah, so after we get the series, like I said, you develop that, so it makes it. It's almost like it was more heartbreaking seeing it in the Clone Wars than it was in Revenge of the Sith all those years in 2005 when we saw it. So,
Yeah.
and anyway,
Yeah.
that's my thoughts.
All right. So one of the coolest scenes, and this is where the music, I think. Oh, and I mentioned this in the chat, but just on the record, since this is being recorded,
I won,
I would
by the way.
agree. What?
I won that argument that
Oh.
this is the best soundtrack.
Best
out of
soundtrack.
all-
I would agree. It probably is. I'm like 98% sure you're right. But yeah. So this is in this next scene here. This is the march on the Jedi Temple, right? Anakin.
which I loved.
Oh, I mean that is, great cinema, and just the way
That's how
it's
I feel
filmed,
every
the
morning
angle
going to work. That's how I walk into the building, just like that.
with
except I
the
don't have
robe
clones-
on.
I don't
Yeah.
have clones behind me, and it's not as dramatic.
Yellow eyes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's you. I can see you doing that. But
Yeah.
no, I mean it's a great scene. The music's perfect, the lighting's perfect, the cinematography, the way the shot's framed, all of it just really works. And then of course we've got the wealth of memes that have generated from the younglings dying. Which at the time was pretty dark. I mean, we knew going into this movie it was the darkest one, right? We heard that from the
I didn't even-
critics.
I didn't even
Lucas
think
had
we'd-
mentioned it.
I didn't think we'd get that much of a hint that he did that. Like, you figured that you would have seen, if George did it today, he probably would have done it where they're in the temple. He says this was done by the lightsabers, where Yoda says, "Oh, this was done by a lightsaber, not a clone," and then that would be our hint, like Anakin did it. But we, he walks in and does the thing, and it's like, you're gonna become a father yourself, and here you are doing this. That was pretty dark. But George, he needed to get there with the darkness to show how bad Anakin had become. You know what I
Right.
mean? You had to show that fall. You couldn't sugarcoat it. Some people complain about the music, by the way, walking into the temple. They say it should have been the Imperial March, but I thought it was perfect.
No.
Yeah,
I
because
disagree.
there was still light in him, really, before he
Yeah.
walked into that temple. And then it just that was it. But
Yeah, because up until that moment, he
Yeah.
hadn't really done a dirty deed. Okay, sure, he killed
killed Mace.
Mace.
helped.
Fine,
Helped.
but that was because he helped him. This was pure, murder. And
Yeah.
there, and then again, we talked about it earlier, but he had already turned. I mean, he had already gotten to the point where there was no return, and he was going to do anything and everything that was asked of him, do what must be done, and he did. He went out and killed a bunch of innocent children, and you could say that, okay, well, he did kill the Sand People as well, but again, there was other, mitigating factors and why he did all that, and really you can't say that he was purely evil at that point, but no, I don't agree. I don't think it should have been the Imperial March. It's too soon. We don't need that just yet.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think that was needed. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, him murdering the younglings was super dark. We knew going into this movie from Lucas, from the critics that had already seen it. We knew it was going to be the darker. They told us it's going to be a little bit darker, and this is probably the scene, right? I mean, there's other scenes as well that are just as dark, but not maybe almost as dark. But this was the one. And then that poor little sap kid of a
Master
Jedi.
Skywalker.
Master Skywalker. Yeah. All right,
Poop your pants. That's what you should do. That's what he did. Ooh, because he even had that. You know what sells it even more is he had the flinch. Like when he lights the lightsaber, he does the little flinch with his arms. You're like, oh man, really?
Kids gonna get it.
Just made it worse, George. Like that just. Anyway.
And then the other fall, I guess, the other moment I have here is later on Mustafar, and just. I mean, apart from him going around just murdering people left and right that had absolutely no chance.
I like that. See, now I like that when they played the Imperial March then. I thought that was a good time to do it because this is like really, he's become the Emperor's hand right now. Like he's become the one, and he does the thing with the doors, and we hear the thing, and that was great. I like that moment. And then the way he was slaughtering, I'm like, yeah, he's going full on. I like this.
He was taking people down left and right.
And then we got the turn, the eyes and stuff. That was cool.
Yeah. All right. So next I want to talk about the number of lightsaber battles in Revenge of the Sith, because there are quite a few of them. And let's talk about the first one, Dooku versus Kenobi and Anakin. So this is a rematch, and then, ultimately ends with Dooku's death, which on Dooku's death, I posted this on Instagram several weeks ago, almost about a month ago now. But him having the two sabers crossed in front of his throat was very similar to what he did to Savage Opress when Savage was training with him. So I thought that was kind of neat that Filoni had done that. But anyways, this was a very cool battle because, again, we talked earlier about how they were in their prime. They were finally working together, and they tell us as much, right? We're going to take them together this time. And he's like, I was thinking the same thing, or I was just about to say the same thing, right? So this is Anakin now more mature. He now realizes the benefit of having Kenobi and understands, how well they do together as master and apprentice, and as equals almost to some extent. So it was one of the better battles, I think. And again, it wasn't as long as I wanted, but we certainly made up for it at the very end with Anakin and Kenobi. But how did you feel about this? I guess this battle overall, and then Dooku's death, and then maybe comment on the look that Dooku throws over to Sidious after the "do it" comment.
Well, that's the problem I have with the fight. Like, I like the dialogue, twice the pride, double the fall, blah blah blah, all that stuff, and it was pretty good. It was nice, although the way he dispatches Obi-Wan was kind of, a little
poor
weird.
Obi-Wan.
Like,
He just gets thrown out every time.
He gets
every fight.
He's up. You'd think he'd just stab him, and that would be the end of it. But that didn't happen. I don't know. I don't know, maybe it's something to do with Qui-Gon. He just couldn't kill him or something. But then when we
couldn't see. I mean, the reality is they had to figure out a way that Kenobi would not see Anakin behead him in cold-blooded murder. I mean, that's the real reason. But yeah, go on.
Well, no, I get that. But then when we get to, he takes his arms off, and then he's got him there with the thing, and you would think he'd say, "Oh, by the way, Anakin, he's the Sith Lord."
Right.
But he just kind of like, I don't know if he's that stunned, because it's a long pause. It's not like a quick one. It's like are you kidding me? You're gonna, and then he just kind of accepts it and loses his head. It gets lopped off, which, I mean, this is the thing with George, lopping heads off, arms off, that type of thing.
Well, so I always saw that as Dooku was 100% trusting of the Emperor, and he was waiting for that moment right at the last minute when Sidious was going to fly out of that chair and save Dooku. And I think that's why he didn't say anything. Like, okay, my master's got my back. This is not how it's going to end. We've been talking about this. This is our war. We've been planning it for so long. And he was waiting and waiting. And even up until the moment when finally Palpatine says, do it, he was like, that's the look. It's like, wait a minute. What are you talking about here? Certainly you're not going to. And then it's gone. I mean, I think that's the only reason he didn't rat him out at that point was he really, truly believed that Sidious was going to bail him out of that in some way. I don't know how, but I think he had blind faith in him.
Maybe. I'll go with that. That's fine.
All right, let's talk about Mace versus Sidious. This one was a little, and this is like feedback. I get it. The cinematography, the choreography here wasn't the best. The fight seemed slower at times. I think they probably pulled out frames at times to kind of speed it up. I don't know if it's because Samuel Jackson's was getting older. I don't know if it was because Ian McDermott is getting older or whatever. But at moments it just seemed really slow paced. And then I've heard other explanations now that that's just the fighting style that they were using because they knew each other's style and that that's a slower pace and they can make all kinds of excuses all day long. The cool thing about this fight was the debate that comes up about whether or not Mace Windu truly did beat Sidious.
I used to think so.
Or here, well, I'll let you weigh in. But
Okay.
So did Mace Windu really take down Sidious? Did he best him in lightsaber combat, or was Sidious playing the rope-a-dope and allowing Mace to take him down so that knowing that Anakin, maybe he foresaw this, Anakin was going to come in and he would finally get that moment to kind of play the victim here and really solidify Anakin's perspective of the Jedi or evil, as he says a little bit later down on Mustafar. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I used to think he bested Palpatine. However, it's kind of strange that he takes out like Kit Fisto and all that, Fisto. He takes them out and leaves it to be Mace Windu, knowing that Anakin's probably going to walk in and see the Jedi that he really kind of doesn't see eye to eye with being left and about to kill the guy that is his only link to saving Padme. Yeah. So he played them for the fool. So I tend to think that, maybe in lightsaber combat, he bested him, but the Emperor could have beat him at any point, like with the unlimited power. Like that was coming next had Anakin not walked in. But I think he was coaxing Anakin to do what he did. So, and he knew that because he foresaw it, did his thing. And, Mace probably could have maybe flipped the script, but I think it was made that way because Anakin was going to walk in and then, Anakin was going to give into the dark side and save him because it was his only link to saving Padme. So he played them for the fool, I think. That's my take. What's your take, sir?
No, I would agree. I originally used to think that, okay, he beat him.
Yeah.
Right. Here, fair and square. But I'm 100% with you. Yes, he probably did beat him. However, Palpatine needed a moment, and he was willing to allow him to be beat so long. I mean, he wasn't going to allow him to win the battle. Let's just put it that way, right? Whether that was lightsaber combat or whether it was a demonstration of force powers, he wasn't going to let Mace Windu ultimately win the battle. He needed Anakin to come in, and he needed something to push Anakin over the ledge, right? He had to, and so I think from that perspective, I think he saw it. I think he had a force vision of this is how it was going to play out. We know that was one of his weaknesses is that he foresaw so many things and believed it 100%, and use that to his advantage. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But yeah, I believe that he did best him in lightsaber combat. However, could he have truly beat Palpatine one-on-one? I don't think he could have. I don't think that. I think you get a more fair fight between Yoda and Sidious, and we're going to come to that one here in a second. But I think that's where Yoda did beat Sidious. So, but yeah. Anyways, that was a short-lived fight. A lot of close-up shots as well, and I think they did that because it kind of masks a lot of the fighting, right? The imperfections of the fighting itself. So let's just jump over to the next one here and then talk about Sidious versus Yoda. That one was it was very different because we didn't get the same kind of fight that we got with Yoda and Dooku. But we got to see a side of Yoda that we still hadn't seen, just how masterful he is and how he was able to, do things that we didn't think he could do to be, I guess, for lack of a better term or words. But That battle was great. I really enjoyed it, and especially Yoda's entrance and coming in and kind of taking those Imperial guards and just slamming them against the wall like they're nothing, just trash that they were. I think really kind of sets the tone. And I remember in watching this movie was I had the same reaction, the same visceral reaction that I had when Dooku and Yoda fought in Attack of the Clones. That holy bananas, we're going to do this. These two are going to fight, and this is something I never thought I would see. But what do you think about how what are your thoughts on that battle?
Well, it's very similar to you. Like, I know he says it. Like, I'll go deal with the Emperor or Sidious, and to see it when he walks in and he does that, I'm like, oh, we're gonna have something special here. And then when they do their thing, and it's funny because I think Sidious senses that Yoda could take him at this point. And then, of course, Sidious answers back, well, Darth Vader will be more powerful than both of us. Like, he's already set in motion, like, but he's trying to get away because he doesn't want to mess with Yoda. He's like, all right, Mace is one thing. You're older than me here. You're like 900 years old or whatever. I don't want to, you get a lot more knowledge of things. I'm not going to mess with that. So I think even if he died, I think he was relegated. Like, all right, my apprentice will just carry on with that, whatever, because he's hell bent on saving his woman there. So, or his wife, or whatever you want to call it, and he'll just, finish the job. Really, it didn't matter. But he was trying to get away for some reason, and that was probably because he didn't want to face Vader. But then he gets a little confident because I think he realized the power shift really goes in his favor during their fight. I think the light side kind of weighs to the dark at this point. Like the pendulum swung that way, and that's why I think he sort of at least gets the upper hand on Yoda, and Yoda's just like gets it to a draw and then goes off into exile.
Yeah.
And
there's too much going on. He's already. He's also probably hurt. I think some of the wounds that he takes are ultimately what puts him down in the next 20 years or so when we see him in Empire Strikes Back. There was certainly Anakin in his return looming. He didn't know if Anakin would show up, and I don't know what that fight would have looked like. But yeah, you're right. He was trying to kind of get out of there at that point. But it was a very great spectacular fight. Never would have envisioned that they would be force throwing around these floating, whatever they're called,
chairs,
pedestals or chairs. Yeah. And then the other thing that always struck me about that fight, and I still don't know how to read this, and I'm interested to hear your take on this, is, we get the moments in there where Sidious is kind of cackling, and he almost looks drunk. And then so that's one moment, and then there's another moment in there where he's kind of hanging off the ledge, and they've kind of dubbed in this like like this comedic silliness. And maybe that's not the right term, but those two parts did throw me for a little for a bit.
I think
the cackling one's fine. I guess it's the one where him hanging and dangling, and that seems a little. Was that supposed to be a comedic moment, or did I read that wrong?
I think he just realizes he's got the upper hand, and he'll somehow win this fight. Like he's I think in his mind he's laughing because, like, I've done it. I've overthrown the Jedi, the Republic. The Sith now have their revenge. We've returned. I was the one that did it. I've survived out of all this lineage of Sith, and here you are defeated now. Even if you win, even if you survive, you're nothing now. Not a big deal to me. You're like a little fly. I just shoo away. So he's kind of laughing at that. I think the humorous or the juxtaposition of it all, and what has happened over the last, I guess 10, 15 years or whatever, in the galaxy, and it came to fruition, and he was kind of just having a moment of laughing.
Yeah.
I don't know. People do weird things when they're in a weird situation. Sometimes they laugh like a crazy man. So
Story of my life.
Yeah.
Let's so we got a couple others, and I want to kind of scuttle through these real quickly here. But we have Kenobi versus Grievous on here. That was a great fight, and we don't have enough time to talk about that one. But
the only thing I'll say is I did enjoy when Obi-Wan kicks him, and he's like, "Oh," like because typical you would think he would just kick him and he wouldn't feel anything, but
sure,
it was nice to see it actually hurts.
Right.
I guess. Yeah.
No, and that's I think they actually talk about that in the making of Revenge of the Sith, where I think George Lucas said Kenobi kicks a motorcycle. Like, that was the analogy that he wanted for that scene. Was I want it to be what would happen if you kicked the motorcycle, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was one. We had the Kenobi versus Anakin, which, I mean, I don't know. We don't have enough time to do this particular fight. But I would say overall that fight it's still up there in terms of whether it's the best one in all of Star Wars. I kind of go back and forth between that and the one from The Last Jedi. But is this your favorite lightsaber duel in Star Wars?
In all of Star Wars, probably not. It's up there though. I would say it's the most emotional one.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
think.
fair. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would say the most emotional because of the impact of the two friends and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Style wise, like fighting wise, I don't think so. At the time, it was obviously, but then when you get some battles in the Clone Wars that are pretty epic, and to be honest, I have to disagree with you with the sequel trilogy. I thought all those lightsaber fights were kind of flat, really. I mean, the throne room fight, yeah, okay, that was pretty good. I think that was the best one out of the sequel trilogy one.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was kind of like flat for some reason to me. I don't know. I would have thought it would have been more theatrical, so to speak. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. You might think I'm nuts. But yes, this one probably the most emotional Star Wars lightsaber fight for me, anyway. But
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So we'll go past it because some of the moments we're going to talk about here are kind of revolve around what's going on there. And then I threw this one in here because this is the one that gets overlooked, I think, a lot of times, and it's so short, but it's probably one of the cooler ones, and it's just something we don't get to see a lot of, and that's the Kenobi and Yoda teaming up against the clones in front of the temple there.
yeah,
I mean that if you go watch it, it's so fast, but just seeing them fight together is pretty darn impressive. And being able to see Yoda at one point, he throws his lightsaber,
that was good.
right? I mean, that was again. I mean, he just full of surprises, right? And things we never really thought Yoda would do, and that's not a move that I would at least going into that movie. And
It's kind of dark side-ish.
it is. That's what I'm saying. Like I would have never thought it's something Vader would do, something a Sith would do, but throwing your lightsaber like that, it just does. It seems out of character of a Jedi. But he's beyond. You get into like not to get into like martial arts and stuff, but you learn all
bets
the
are off.
basic stuff,
Yeah.
right? But then when you get to these upper echelons of mastery, you start learning things that you didn't even know you were allowed to do or could do. And that's kind of the beauty of taking any kind of martial art. But and we kind of saw that here with him kind of tossing his lightsaber like
Well,
that. But,
at this point, everything's going to hell. So why not? At this point, like there's really no doctrine to live up to at this point. Like it's gone. So this is survival, and if this is what I got to do to survive, so be it. I got to do it, and so be it. That's
yeah,
just
and
the way
that's
it is.
and that's the
Yeah.
that's the other part of the story. So I mean, we're talking about the theatrics of it all and the choreography of it all, but emotionally, right? You think about this is the same Yoda back in the very first episode of the Clone Wars, where he kind of sat those clones down and was having a
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
with them and making them feel human again and all that, right? And here he is, he's just murdering these guys. He has to, he has no choice. And you got Kenobi the same way. He's led some of these people, all of these clones into battle time and time again through the Clone Wars. And they're both, I mean, they've got to both be grieving. Even as much as cool as it is, as fun it is to kill these guys because they're probably nothing to them. They have to, I mean, they're the emotional weight of them going through and just slaughtering these clones like, cattle. Yeah, or butter. Is just I don't know. It's got to weigh on them pretty heavily. So they're still in that aspect of it as well. All right. Okay. Let's talk about these are just quick things, and this will be the final thing before we get into our moments. And we can do these really fast. But one of the things that I think really stands out for Revenge of the Sith is some of what I call the transitional moments, and these are the moments that we got at the very end of the movie, and it was almost like a way for George Lucas to kind of bridge the gap, the two trilogies. Again, this was prior to Rogue One, but
Yep.
there were things that he was throwing in here to kind of help segue directly into A New Hope. And so the birth of Luke and Leia, obviously, that was huge. I don't remember. I don't at least the way I remember this is I had no idea this was going to happen. Right? I thought we were
Yeah.
going to get the end of the battle and that's it, and we would never
Yeah, I
see
didn't think-
anything like
yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
this was a huge and really welcome surprise for me, being original trilogy fan, being able to see Luke and Leia being birthed, and then the action of Padme naming them right there on screen. I mean, that was just really awesome stuff. The birth of Darth Vader obviously should go without being said. And I say the birth of Darth Vader, I don't mean Anakin turning to the dark side. I mean the actual reconstruction and the birth
Yeah.
of Anakin, or sorry, Darth Vader rising literally after coming off of the table with the Imperial symbol and all that. I mean, just all the symbolism there.
The Frankenstein moment. Yep.
Yeah, the Frankenstein moment, perfect. Yoda's exile. We talked about that being as kind of a transitional thing for what we would see in Empire Strikes Back. Padme's funeral is pretty emotional. I think, especially after something like Master and Apprentice, where it's mentioned in there. You get the moment with Kenobi right before the funeral starts. You get to see that. That weighs heavily, and then obviously with her wearing the little trinket that Anakin made for her,
Yep.
back, as a callback to the Phantom Menace. Or
I remember back in the day, before all this happened, when they announced I think maybe the prequel trilogy back in whenever they announced it before it was even filmed. I said, "Oh, I bet you Palpatine kills her, like Luke and Leia's mom and all that stuff." And that didn't happen. But I mean, it was weird the things that you were thinking of, and it still sticks with me. Like I thought she was gonna die at the hands of Palpatine, but didn't happen that way.
no, yeah, and yeah, it's hard to say like what you would like more, right? Having
Yeah.
seen it now, but and then the other three things were Tarkin, Palpatine, Vader, and then the Death Star. That
Yep.
was a cool
Which I like.
scene. I mean, I
Yep.
remember getting real giddy seeing whoever was playing Tarkin. I forget who the actor is now.
Yep.
That was great. Leia, and this is where you didn't get your moment of Alderaan. We got Alderaan for all of
Yep.
about 15 seconds
Yep.
here in this scene. But seeing her going back to that family that was trying to steal children at one point. No, I'm kidding. And then finally, and then the last shot, right, with Luke and the twin sons,
Yes.
was another great moment. So these were all great, just transitional moments and things that kind of, there's a lot of symbolism in these that we would see later on in parts 4, 5, and even 6. And yeah, it should go without saying that those were certainly highlight moments for me, at least, going
Yes.
into Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
All right. So with the time that we got left,
Yes.
let's talk about your scene, the one that you wanted to break down. Talk about it. I won't spoil it, but
Well,
look at that! If you're
It's
watching,
this one right here.
yeah, this scene we talk about a lot on the show.
I'm not gonna play it or anything like that. I don't think you could hear the audio, but I'll just blow it up here because I want to concentrate on this look. And of course, the scene is the opera scene, which as Albert said, we've talked a million times. It seems on the show. But I was going back as I was thinking of this, and you asked me last night on the roundtable after it was over, what scene are you going to do, Mike? And I mentioned it, and I started thinking back to when I originally watched Revenge of the Sith in the theater, the first couple of times, and you're trying to process things. And one of the things that always sticks out to you is how does Anakin not get the hint that, hey, I'm the bad guy here and what's going on? But this look, that it stood out to me, like he has this look throughout the scene where he's doing this, and Sidious is of course explaining Darth Plagueis, which
Right.
when he mentions Darth Plagueis the Wise, and ooh, like my eyes lit up, like ooh, Sith lore, like we never gotten this before. This is great.
Yeah.
But as he's telling the story, and Anakin's uncomfortable because he's spying, he's squirming. But as Palpatine's telling it, and of course he mentions the midichlorians, which I love because of course we got to throw that in there to angry get fans all riled up and everything because of the word. It looked to me, and of course Palpatine didn't reveal himself till later down the line here, but I always felt like at least at the time. By the way, this is from Star Wars Latin America, by the way, on YouTube. I'm getting this from. So they had the nice clip, so I just want to give them a shout out in case someone's wondering where I got the clip. Not that I'm playing it, but I always got the feeling like Anakin knew there was like something there, and he needed to keep him alive, or needed him to save Padme somehow because he knew the story. So obviously that plays into what we see, when he reveals himself, and then the whole situation with Mace, which we talked about. But did you get that feeling when you saw the scene that maybe Anakin, because it's when you watch the scene, you get the feeling like Anakin, well, you can kind of say, well, even the Jedi were kind of stupid, obviously, because they didn't realize, oh, by the way, he's him. Although you get the hint that like Mace kind of knew, like, he says, well, our worst fears came true, and he tells Anakin to stay put or whatever.
Yeah.
You've gained my trust and everything. And then when you see the Clone Wars, they kind of hint that as well. So, and they want him to spy on him. So there was that kind of like, yeah, maybe there's something there with the guy because he's been in power for so long. But that look that Anakin's given now in this scene, when you watch it,
I mean, it
I
looks
feel like,
super suspicious.
yeah,
Like he knows, and
it's like he knows, but he doesn't want to admit that he's
right.
he's the bad guy, because Anakin. It's almost like the shift is where Anakin's starting to say like, all right, I kind of gotta go this way because I gotta save Padme because I'm having all these visions. Which Palpatine, that's a whole other story. If he was doing that, he probably was. When you go to the sequel trilogy, I was every voice in your head. Blah blah blah. It's probably the same thing. So I don't know. What are your feelings on this scene? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that are going on with the scene. It was a cool scene. It's one of the, that one-on-one dialogue with the two of them. It's a special moment with the two. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on my crazy theory that Anakin actually knew and was kind of
Turn a
letting
deaf
it
ear,
play out, if you will?
blind eye kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So first off, this scene is one of my favorites, and we were debating when we talked about it. If you weren't going to do this scene, I was going to do this scene.
Yeah, I'm sure,
because there's a lot in the scene, and it's one of my favorite ones. The acting is amazing in this scene. Like Ian McDiarmid does like the best Palpatine here that I think he does in any of the movies and any of the anytime he's ever done the voice for him. That said, I think, and I may have the order wrong, but I cannot remember, and you tell me if I'm wrong here. I think this scene happens after Yoda had already told him people have to die, right? Sometimes death is part of part of life.
Yes.
Right? And so
I think so.
Either way, even if it's not, the Anakin at this moment is doing anything they've already played up the fact that he's been having these nightmares for so long. Let's say he did, give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he didn't know that Palpatine, or didn't suspect that Palpatine was the Sith Lord at this point. There are people in the world of Star Wars that are just very knowledgeable of archaeology and traditions and culture and that sort of thing. And so, and I think at this point, Anakin, if nothing else, is looking at him as though he's just well-versed in the Sith as much as he is well-versed in the Jedi. Like, he knows a lot about the Jedi, even though this guy's a senator. And so I think there's you could probably certainly say that, well, he was just looking at him as though, wow, how come we've never talked about this? And how do you know so much about this without necessarily going to, oh, you must be the Sith Lord? That said, I agree. I do feel like he does think, or at least has a suspicion, that Palpatine is either, if not the Sith Lord, somehow connected to the Sith Lord. But at this point, and again, especially if this scene happens after the Yoda scene, I don't think he cares. He's done. I mean, he hasn't crossed over the dark side, but he's willing to entertain at this point anything and everything, because everybody's telling him there's nothing you can do. Death is inevitable. You're not all powerful, Anakin. Right? And here's finally somebody that says, hey, dude, that's really not all that's there. You can do something, and this has happened before, and here's what happened. And if you want to know more, here's my number. And I think, so I think that's there's definitely a moment here where even if he is suspicious of it, maybe not necessarily calling him the Sith Lord, but definitely attached to it, that I think
they told
he's okay
him to
with
spy on him too. So there's like already suspicion going in.
Yeah.
When you think about it, and now he's telling this story. I think it's more like, I don't think he thinks he's the Sith Lord, because then we get the reaction we get when we see him in the office. I think he's like, all right, you're the key to kind of knowing what's going on. But does that contradict, like, when he finds out, when he reveals himself and he ignites this, and he kind of wants to, but obviously he's hesitant, and he's playing into Palpatine's hands, where he's like, well, you want to, I can feel your anger and all that other stuff. But again, it goes back to, he planted that seed brilliantly and said, well, there are ways to save your wife. I might know a thing or two, that type of thing, you know? So, yeah. All right. Well, that was interesting. I just remember when I first watched it and immediately thought, Anakin knows. He knows, and he's just kind of turning a blind eye to it, because he's gone, and the ironic thing is, like, where he says the Sith only concentrate on themselves. They focus inward or whatever, and yet here's what he's doing, because it's about Padme, which is really his obsession with Padme. It's not that he's really in love, but that's just my theory. But
anyway. The other cool thing about this scene too is when it's going on in the background, the opera itself. Yeah, when he's talking about life and birth and all that, and you get what looks like,
Vader.
no, I don't mean Vader.
Yeah.
To me, it always seemed like that was, you know, something being fertilized. Like I can see that happening. That you get these little squiggly lines,
Yeah, yeah.
and you get like
Von
what looks
Call.
like an egg, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I don't know. I forget all of the biology of it, but just that going on in the background as he's talking about life and birth and you know all that is just perfect. Like it's very poetic, and I know that was all intentional
Oh, of
because
course, yeah.
they talk about that in some of the books that I mentioned earlier on. So,
Yes.
anyways, yeah. So there's a lot in the scene. Again, it's one of my favorites, and there's a lot that you can still dig out of that. Hopefully, we'll at some point get to see all this stuff that's mentioned here, but who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me talk about mine real quick because I know we're
Yes.
really getting short on time here,
No,
but
no, go ahead.
I have the quote of "You were the chosen one," and there's a lot to it, in more than just that. So I want to go to the scene where Anakin and Kenobi, they've already kind of went around a circle right before Padme fell down to the ground or after Padme falls,
Yeah.
and they've already had their big battle. And you know, this is he's standing on that little floating whatever it is above the lava. They're in hell,
Yeah.
and you know, Kenobi's first words are, "I have failed you, Anakin. I have failed
Yeah.
you."
Yep.
And I really believe at that point that Anakin or Kenobi no longer believes that Anakin is the chosen one. I think he believed that because Qui-Gon told him that initially. I
Yeah.
think after everything that they've been through in, the Clone Wars and everything
Orders.
up until this point, I think all made Kenobi believe 100% that yeah, Qui-Gon was right. This is the chosen one. He's powerful. He's capable.
But he
Hold
did
on.
doubt that, though. I'm just going to bring up Mace when he turns to Mace and says, "Is he not the chosen one?" So he was a little fractured there going in. I believe you're
Yeah.
right. Like
No, I get it.
carry on. I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
But I think what happens now, he says he's failed him. He probably means that literally. I didn't train you the way, and this is more master and apprentice stuff. But he didn't train him the way he wanted to. Kenobi realizes that this was a failed experiment in a lot of different ways. Um, and then Anakin's response to him failing was, "I should have known the Jedi were plotting to take over." Right? And he says, "From my point of view," and then says, "Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil." He says, "From my point of view, the Jedi are evil." Again, this plays into that whole point of view, a certain point of view thing that we talked about prior
Yep.
to us coming into the main topic. And then Kenobi
Well,
fires
that goes
back,
what
well,
Sidious said. Like he says that evil is a point of view, or good is whatever he says there. It's the same thing. It's just reversed. But go
right.
ahead.
Yep.
Continue. Sorry. I keep
And then he says,
interrupting
"Well,
you.
then you
Go
were
ahead.
lost."
Yep.
And then he says, "This is the end for you, my master, and it's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. You understand my power. Don't try to." And then it finally ends with, okay, then this is where the quote comes in. "You
Yes.
were the chosen one. It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them, bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness." So at that point, and this is kind of obvious now. I think retrospectively looking at the entire saga and certainly what we got from Rebels, but really Kenobi he feels like he's got all this wrong. And it's not until Luke is born, until he takes it upon himself to kind of be the guardian of Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, that he finally realizes that, okay, maybe the prophecy was misunderstood a little bit. And maybe we were just one generation off, and that Luke Skywalker now is the chosen one, right?
True. Yep.
Because this is what happens when, we get to Rebels, when after Darth Maul falls and Kenobi kills
Yeah.
him. He has that moment where he's looking up at him and he says, "Is it the chosen one?" And Kenobi very, silently says, "Yes, that's right. That's what he's doing there. He's there to protect the chosen one." But Kenobi has abandoned this idea, and we see this even more so in the original trilogy. Like, he doesn't believe at all that there's no bringing Anakin back, that he's truly gone. And and up until that point, I really feel like he still believes that Luke Skywalker is the chosen one, and that's why they're trying to get him ready to go fight, Darth Vader and face Sidious, and he's got to destroy them because that's going to bring balance to the Force. And in that last moment there, where he says, "I hate you," which I thought was a great line because the way it's delivered is great. It's a very emotional moment in that scene in Revenge of the Sith. He's on fire. He's got the red eyes. It's just full of hate, which you would expect, as somebody to be like him in that moment. And the only thing that Kenobi says back is, "You were my brother, Anakin."
I loved you.
And I loved you, right? That's pretty gripping now, especially again, it's one of those things where at the time, yes, it's still touching, it was emotional and that sort of thing, but as the years have gone on, and certainly after all the novels and the Clone Wars and everything that we've got, and we know more about
There's
the
more layers
relationship.
to it now.
Certainly, way more layers to that. But it speaks to the relationship. It speaks to the relationship of Kenobi and of Anakin. Going into this, we talked about this on The Phantom Menace. Anakin didn't have any parents. Qui-Gon was probably a father figure for him. And to some extent, I think Anakin never truly had a real father. And there were probably moments where he looked at Kenobi as a father figure, and there were moments where he looked at Anakin or Kenobi as a brother. And I think from both of their perspectives, as things went on, as they got older, and certainly as they fought together a lot more, that relationship turned into more of a mutual respect. It turned into we truly are brothers and not father son father kind of relationship. Um, and you could say that that was probably the more emotional one there. That to him to finally confess and kind of face the facts that this is over. Like everything that had happened up until that point is gone, and that this person truly was gone, and that he loved him. And I take it at face value. I take him saying that as though I have no love for you at this point. You've potentially killed Padme. I've seen what you've done to everybody in the Jedi Temple. I know the dirty deeds you've done. You're sitting here trying to kill me. He almost killed him. Had
Yeah.
he not blocked him with that lightsaber, kicked him, I think is what he did right there when they were fighting. I believe Kenobi when he says it, that I loved you. I don't think there's any love for him whatsoever. And he goes so far as to take that into the next trilogy and say, you need to go kill your father, right? Luke Skywalker, go kill your
murder
dad.
Yeah,
Go murder your father because he's that evil.
Favor. Yeah, go murder your dad for me. Yeah, give me
Right.
that one solid. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, he is your father.
Right, before that, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of should have mentioned that, but don't worry about that. Yeah.
So this scene is really, I mean, the focus of this, there's a lot to dissect here, and we could spin off onto shows literally about some of this stuff, but the line was, you were the chosen one, and the idea here being that up until that point, I think, and to your point, I agree, Kenobi probably had moments in there, certainly beyond even what we saw in Revenge of the Sith, there were probably plenty of moments where he was kind of doubting whether or not he truly was. But by and large, I would say at this point, he does believe it. And going into, at this moment, he no longer does. And then certainly going into the original trilogy and what we see in Rebels, Vader's not it. I don't think he believes that it is him anymore. And it truly is Luke Skywalker. And that's why he's taken it upon himself to guard Luke Skywalker on Tatooine for, almost 20 years. So,
well, he was Kenobi's new hope, really, when he saw Luke.
Yeah.
It kind of latched onto that. I guess if there was any love for Anakin, it was just to watch over Luke. Obviously, that whatever was left, like I remember because he does say, and he was a good friend. Like he does have those moments where he remembers the good stuff.
Yeah.
And even Padme, like you got to think like he feels like he owes it to them to watch over Luke to bring balance to the Force, and he's the chosen one. So I'll look after him and whatnot. So, look at it that way, I guess.
Yeah, no. Well, we'll leave it at that.
All right.
At least that was my moment. Anything else on Revenge of the Sith?
No, other than it's my second favorite of all the Star Wars films.
Of Star Wars?
Yes. Because it got dark,
So I said this, and then we've got like 2 minutes left. I'm gonna read it just really quickly. But that scene that I mentioned earlier about Yoda kind of confessing his arrogance from the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Here's the passage. It says, "Too old I was," Yoda said, "too rigid, too arrogant to see that the old way is not the only way. These Jedi, I trained them to become Jedi who had trained me long centuries ago. But those ancient Jedi of a different time they were. Changed has the galaxy. Changed the order did not. Because let it change, I did not." And what he's saying here, and this is like Yoda speaks, I know it sounds kind of jumbled, of course it is, but what he's saying is he's acknowledging that he was arrogant in most of what he was doing in this trilogy, first off, and what we saw in the Clone Wars. But on top of that, they were too rigid, that they didn't heed the ways of long ago, right? They were now a manifestation of the Jedi that didn't exist centuries ago, saying that they were probably much more flexible way back then, and that they had become too rigid, and that the galaxy was changing, but they weren't keeping up with the changes. And this is like, I mean, this probably resonates with anybody, right? And outside of Star Wars, there's probably a life lesson here of Sometimes you have to
Too rigid.
change. Yeah, you're too rigid. You've got to be able to adapt. You've got to be able to roll with, how things are evolving around you. And if you don't, you become the dinosaur that eventually gets eradicated and goes extinct. And that's exactly what happened here. We saw an extinction of an order that had lived for so many thousands of years. And Yoda's confessing that he acknowledges why, and he's taking the blame. He's shouldering the blame for what exactly happened here, and at least for the most part. And he should. I mean, he's one of the leaders. Him and Mace Windu are the two highest people in the Jedi Order. They should bear the responsibility. And it's cool, again, so the reason I brought that up, and for those of you that may be just coming in now or tuning in late or whatever, I brought that up because in the novelization, we get a lot more of this context that we don't necessarily get from the movies. And I think this paints Yoda in a much more, it paints him in a better light, even though he's still wrong. I think it paints him in a better light to kind of hear this and see this, that he's self-aware of what's happening and what has happened, and he's bearing the burden of responsibility for that as, the leader of the Jedi Order. Or at least the Jedi Council. I forget which is.
No, I agree. He's humbled,
Sure.
A butt kicking will do that to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll end that part of the show. Before we go, we got a couple things on feedback. This is from our Discord. Lucid Truth says, listening to the new episode, love the idea of a Qui-Gon Jinn episode. So we got our work cut out for that. We've got to do that. When you brought up Ahsoka, it made me think of how Anakin's relationship with Ahsoka is likely what Qui-Gon's relationship with Anakin would have been. Breaking rules, seeing everything different from the council, etc. 100% agree there. So thank you, Lucid Truth, for the feedback there. And then shout out to Dev, who says, just caught the Attack of the Clones episode. Thanks for such a thoughtful review. I was 12 when it came out, and despite the flaws, I absolutely went gaga for this movie. I loved the love story. Anyways, I've been going through some medical stuff right now, and this episode was really a delightful distraction. It reminded me how much I love Star Wars and how Star Wars has always been there for me in trying times. Keep up the work, guys. So thank you, Dev. Speedy recovery. And thank you both for the feedback. It's always welcome. All right. What are we doing with the network before we get out of here?
Not much. I guess what they're going to have Josh and Joe, they're going to have Michaela on?
They just had her on. No, this is the one that just came out.
Oh, did they? All right.
Thursday,
good,
yep.
Good. Oh,
yeah, they did The Village by M. Night Shyamalan. I forget how to say his last name.
That was such a letdown, man.
The movie?
That was
The Village?
Yeah.
I liked it. Well, there were moments I liked. We're not going to get into this. We have no time.
I'm just saying it's just like the Bill and Ted thing. Like I said last night on the EGM roundtable, it's going to be an awful movie, and you guys gave me a bunch of crap for it, but it is, so whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess we get some news, right? We get some big news.
There's some big news. We're going to break the news here on this episode for anybody that stayed around long enough to listen.
I know. I feel bad that we didn't announce this at the beginning of the show. We probably should have did that at the beginning.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So I put Return of the Jedi, and Jedi's in quotes, but an old friend will be back here with us on the next episode 329, as we break
Not
down
the one you think.
A New Hope. No, not the old friend you're thinking of, but this is Jonesy.
Yes.
So Jonesy will officially be back as of episode 329, and we will look to record that sometime next week. We've got a date, and then we've got a backup date, so I don't want to tell you what day it's going to be because it could be the backup date, but sometime next week. And if you're a Patreon member, obviously you'll get the show before anyone else.
Yes.
But yeah, so that'll be unless you catch a live show. But yes, Jonesy will be back on episode 329, and the way this is going to work is Jonesy will be with us for A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and after Return of the Jedi, we'll kick this guy out of here.
Yes.
And Michael will be detaching, and Jonesy and I will pick up the sequel trilogy, and we'll break down the final 3 movies for you all. So
I'm so excited to finally really retire. I'm excited about it.
No, we're excited to have Jonesy back. I know it's been a while. Yes. I know you guys have had a lot of questions, and again, we've always told you he's coming back. He's been well. This stuff going on, and luckily we had really great people like Michaela and Maggie to jump in. Oh, and Mike Rondo too. Rondo.
No, don't, please, no. Please. All right, I'm going to hit the button. Hopefully I hit the right one. I don't play 3/4 to play or the X-Files or anything like that. But thank you for joining us, everybody. It's been fun. Albert, I'll see you and Jonesy later this week coming up or whatever.
Looking forward to it.
So that'll be fun. Cheers. See you guys later.
still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.